Hello and welcome to this trailer breakdown of Outcast Second Contact. So shortly after I released my video, out came this trailer. It kind of made my video a bit obsolete, but anyway, we're going to look at this video and we're going to sort of look about certain things in the background, maybe things you didn't notice the first time around, or maybe even the 7th time around, depending on how many times you might have seen it. But anyway, please enjoy as we take a closer look into Outcast Second Contact. Straight away we have a nice lovely couple of seconds footage of the barriers which blocks off Cutter from the barracks. Inside here is also the Ventilator training ground, so it'd be interesting if they add that in. They still rotate, they're looking fantastic. Before, when Cutter got close, an energy beam would come at him, so it'd be interesting to see if that returns. Right now it looks like they got this kind of sort of water reflection thing going on. Looks very nice. The buildings look very similar. The next shot we have is a couple of wrist workers chilling out in the fields. We've got at least a handful of them here. We've got a yellow-coloured Tanha worker here, which is fantastic. Before we'd seen a red one, and later on we saw a few more colours, so it's good that there's a variety of colours in this game still. Also to mention, in the background we can see the houses have a beautiful detail on the roofs now, with a moss kind of growing inside the tiles. Another thing to take note is that the outside of the houses all now have these kind of support structures where the roof ellipses out, so that's fantastic. You'll see a few more shots of those as well. We can see an interior here. Overall, it looks like they've done a lovely job on the buildings as well. We can see a dome part here, which looks like a nest of a ventilope, which you could climb up before, but there wasn't much at the top, so it'll be interesting to see if there's anything there now. Next, we cut to the Essence well, where we've got our friend here who's guarding it and keeping it all safe and whatnot. You'll end up talking to him, and as we can see, he's got a blue tunic on, which we haven't seen before, I don't believe, so that's a new costume he's wearing. We've got a couple of Heridiums here, a lovely purple flower down there. Yeah, the well looks very different. Before it's shooting out a variety of colours, of circles and whatnot, so it's interesting they've gone for this blue streaks with a couple of emitters around, so that's interesting. So we see what the variety is when we finally get to play the game. We can also see the dynamic lighting working beautifully, as these big stones of the Essence symbols are really casting a shadow on the ground. We can even see there's detail in the grass also has shadow as well, which I think is fantastic. And our next shot, we've got a couple of Tanha galloping through the wild. If we rewind here back to the beginning, we can see in the background here, we can actually see Cutter standing there with another Talon in the background. I think this is actually the same pose as this picture I was given, which is quite interesting. I think this might be the Talon you meet when you first arrive in Shamazar. It's hard to tell. One of the things we can tell about the Tanha is that, number one, they're running a lot quicker than they were before, and their necks also point out this time, which is really interesting. A nice little detail to the animation there. Also, their buttholes are still there, which is, I guess that's a good thing. And then we get our first shot of Daoka. Now, interesting, things have changed from this one. Originally, there was a ripple effect going through, and it was a lot thicker. In this version, we can see straight through it, and it's also got that similar water reflection effect that was going on with the barriers. Also through here we can see a couple of ammo packs on the ground, one here and one there. It looks quite similar, but this one's got a blue dot, this one's got a red dot, so I'm guessing it's two varying ammos. Again, another shot in the background, we can see the support structures to the houses have all been added, looking fantastic. And the title screen, again, nice little reflections here, there's not too much going on in the background. One thing we can note, if you look over here, these stones here are in shadow, whilst the ones in front of them and behind them aren't. Now this is something that I haven't mentioned yet, but this game does have a dynamic kind of cloud lighting as well, which I think is great. So as you walk around, there will be patches of clouds, shadows around, which I think is brilliant. And then we cut to Cutter sleeping in his bed with his eyes wide open, an interesting way to sleep. One thing that was interesting in my last video, I noted that the detail on the shoulder, I thought it was the Ulukai symbol, and it was a nice little patch there to go with the one on his front. However, from this shot we can see it's just 3 tears, so for something I thought was a nice bit of detail, it was more of a worn detail, so that's quite funny. But yeah, anyway, so as we continue this shot, you can see Cutter's happily lying down on some Weetabix here. He's got a nice chamber bucket and a couple of books to read. Then we've got Cutter standing up talking to Zokrim, the leader of the Dolotite Guardians. We've got another one there behind, having a little cheeky look in, seeing what's going on. Cutter's waking up animation. Sadly, all the animations aren't going to be as fluent as they were in the original game, as not a lot of people know this, but the original game was actually all motion captured. Every time you saw someone running or walking or talking, it was all captured through motion. Someone using a suit, a very primitive version of what they use today. but obviously if you want to recreate that in today's world, it's sadly going to cost a lot of money. So the budget for this remake wasn't anywhere near which was, I reckon, needed. But it does the job, and I think it'll be fine in the end. We'll get used to it. Next we cut to Motazar, and we see 4 Talan pushing the wheel that powers the big hammer in the background there. In the background to the right there, we can see that there's now been railings added to all the pathways and whatnot, which I think is fantastic, because I always thought it was a bit risky. Also up here, I'm not sure if this is actually something that was there before, but it looks like there's another platform. I might just be getting my bearings wrong, but I think this has been added in. I'm not sure. Let's continue on. Next, we get a nice shot of a Talan soldier smacking one of the worker Talans. Oh my goodness. If we take a closer look, you can see there's a few more things going on. In the background, we have the railings there. One thing I like is, as this soldier's clearly asked him to do something, and he's like, no, I'm not doing this, and the soldier's jaw is just like, oh, I can't believe you said this, and whoop-pow! Gives him a smack for it. So this is interesting. I think we'll see this animation going on in the background or something, because this is not from anything in the original. There's nothing like this. So it looks like they've added a few more animations in the world that you can come across. So there's one getting smacked here, and in the next shot we have, it looks like, one of the worker Talans about to be executed. Also, something to note is the 2 soldiers are wearing different types of tunics. The one in the background is wearing a full one with trousers. This one is only wearing like a diaper and something to go across his waist. I don't remember seeing a Talan like that in the original game. I might be wrong, but quite revealing. I mean, yeah, it's not going too into it, but there's definitely some detail there. Anyway, let's continue. I mean, if the Tanha have arseholes, then yeah. Anyway, again, a few things to take note. We've got lovely flames there. There's definitely a more variety of flowers in this game. There's blues and reds being used just on one plant. It's fantastic. We've got the big moon in the background, and yeah, let's move on to the next one. So we come back to Kata talking to Zokrim. We kind of see the limitations of the facial animations for the language. Seems like it's more of an automated system where you type in what's being said, and the program will move the lips to try and suit those words. Also to note, in the background, it looks like the health pickup has been given an all-new design. Much better than the original white box with a red cross on. And then we come back to Motazar, where Kata is going through a couple of the trials to get to the prison. And in the background there to the left, you can see there's a bit of a puff or an explosion of magma in the background coming from the lava stream. Nice bit of detail. Now in the game, there are some Krakets running around at the bottom here. We can't see anything in this shot, which is a shame. There is something here though. I noticed this a few times. It's something moving back and forth. It might just be a perspective change. I don't know. It might be part of the bridge. Anyway, let's continue. We get a nice shot of back on Shamazar as Kata swims through the waters. I don't really know where this is, but we've got a storage hut to the right there, and another building here, so that could be the Temple Fae, but it looks rather arced. I don't know what that building is, so interesting. It might be the Temple Fae. Next, we have Kata riding a Tanha gloriously through the rice fields. There's a rice field worker in front of him. Not much to go on this one, but if you look to the far right, there's definitely the Temple Fae there, and it's looking rather big. It is quite a large structure for this level, but something that big and interesting. It definitely looks like they've got a lot more detail into it, which I think is fantastic. As we move on, we're back onto Razar, or Razanar as I like to call it, but I've been corrected. There's Kata walking up, and as we can see below the bridge, there seems to be a bit more detail in the background. It looks like the river curves round a bit more, but it could just be me getting some bearings wrong. Other than that, snow looks fantastic, and we'll come back to this location later. Then we cut to another part of the trials as Kata tries to get to a prison. The rocks are still there, looking all rocky, I guess. And then we get our first clip of Kata doing a weird janky-ass jump. That's right. So I think the reason why it looks like this is the model of Kata had to be changed, as the original one wasn't really accurate to a human body, and it would look very odd if they used that model's structure for the base of the new Kata, as his arms are very long and whatnot, and he could jump quite high, and it didn't look as weird. But now, because they're having to use a more human model, the jumping has to kind of stay the same, because a lot of the objects are a certain distance away, so therefore the jumping has to be consistent. So I think that's why it looks so weird. But I think the jumping can be improved. There's a lot more detail going on up here. Before in the original game, I don't think there was anything there. I might be wrong, but that's interesting. Could do some boundary breaking there one day. That'd be quite fun. And I did say the lava looks fantastic. You can see it moving slowly. We'll come back to it later as well, but it just looks fantastic. We then get our first glimpse at a close-up of a Talan talking. Oh my goodness, this looks like some pre-rendered visuals from a 90s game. Constructor comes to mind for some reason. So a few things to take into account. Obviously, like I said before, the budget is very limited on this game, and they don't have the luxury of motion capture like before, which was a huge factor into the original game, as these days it's something that's very costly. But something to take into account is the shadows. Like, all the models have accurate shadows as to where the sun is. I think that's fantastic, and I think that's going to be a large factor into the game. Yes, it's a shame the animation can't be there, but it is just the way it is, guys. Next up, we have Cutter walking through Talazar. We've got a wrist worker to the front of us, and to the right we've got a merchant. Also, one thing to take into account, I don't think anybody's noticed this, but the cloth in these stalls, can you see just above, sticking out of the buildings? The cloth is actually waving around. This is one thing the Unity engine does really well, it's cloth-based models. As we continue, we've got the Palace Fae in the background, looking very similar to how it did in the original game, so I don't think there's much change there. Nothing else really in this shot. We've got a couple of Talan, which we do have to talk to for quests and whatnot up front here. And then we've had another lovely shot of Cutter doing a jump from one building to the other, and holy hell, completely bonkers. We see him collecting some Zorkins. It looks like it's collected a similar way. I was wondering how they were going to do this, because it is such a sort of a 90s thing, collecting a big bulky thing, but I think it's fine. It's just one of the elements that looked fine back in the 90s, but now in 2017 it's something that games have left behind. Another thing to note, it looks like a lot of Talan have started placing potted plants on some rooftops, which I think is quite a nice touch. Also, in front of the one to the left here, you can see a key, which is one of the things you have to collect to get into storage houses and whatnot. The golden dome's looking fantastic as well. Looks like there's an interesting bump map going on there with kind of like a dry paint texture. It looks fantastic. And then we're taken back to Motazar, and I think it's fantastic. We can take a few things in just from this shot. I don't think the half spheres on the rooftops were blue. They might have been, but they look fantastic and just really go well with the color palette. Another thing I just noticed is these vines growing up the side of this building. That looks beautiful. Even down here, we've got one of the vines growing out, another one up this building. I think the one thing we can't deny is that they've really, really made the world look fantastic, beautiful, lived in, worn, all those words and more probably. We've still got a few of the crushers or the plougers here. I'm hoping we'll see these in action because they weren't touched in the original, so it'd be interesting to see if they go around, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. And then we have a nice look at what the HUD looks like for binoculars. If you look at the top left, we are in X-ray mode. X-ray mode in the last one was kind of had like a night vision look to it, so it looks like they've changed that maybe. The compass at the top does move as the binoculars move, and at the bottom you can see we are zoomed in by 10. The soldiers in this shot, we've got 2 lower tier ones and a higher tier one. You can tell because the back of the head has been given this kind of extra arc. The higher tier ones all have that, and the lower ones are kind of the smaller ones. I think this might be, if you're a younger Talan, maybe you don't have this part, but if you're an older one, you get, you know, it's something that grows. It's just my assumption. Cutting to another shot with the binoculars still equipped, we can see that it's now slightly zoomed out, and it's ×6 this time, and the bar grows from the left to the right. It'd be interesting to see if there's any interiors to these huge buildings. Before they were just huge lumps of concrete, and you can only get up to the rooftop. Again, railings have been added and look fantastic. And this next shot of Cutter walking over a bridge, there's a few things to take in. Now the first thing, before in the original game, voxels, you couldn't make bridges out of those. You'd have to create a model of a bridge for Cutter to walk across. And so now we have these beautiful bridges made out of stone, where the lava just passes across, and I believe Cutter's probably walking over another one. Another thing to take into account is over here, we have one of the other huge buildings. Now before you could get on top of this and then jump off and slide down the rocks, it looks like there's now a ravine of lava in between the building and the land. Next, we've got to look at some of the combat they've added to the game. The game was originally slated to come out in March, but they thought they wanted to add a bit more into the game, and the added combat was one of them. Now Cutter can crouch, hide behind certain things, roll as well. It all looks pretty great. But one thing to take into account is how well the lighting effects work. As we see this energy projectile fly straight over this barrel and Cutter, we can see the lighting changes on both of them, and that just looks fantastic. Now in this shot to the left, we've got the Kaful, which is a wind capture device. When you play the game, you'll bump into the creator of that. Make sure to compliment his machine, just a tip there. And one thing to know is, I don't know where this projectile comes from. Now, as we can see, they come from a source, and it's usually a directional shot. So, yeah, I have no idea what's going on, because the camera does turn over here to no one. So who knows what happened. In the background, you can see a piece of black smoke. I think there's just a bug with the depth of mist or something like that. I don't know. I've seen it in a few other screenshots, so something to probably fix there. Next up, we see Cutter using an innocent Tanha as a shield. My goodness. There's not really much to add to this scene. I did notice that Cutter's backpack isn't lit up, so I have no idea what the lights are supposed to indicate anymore. Another shot of Cutter shooting a Tanha soldier. This looks like one of the lower tier ones. I can't tell if this guy's uniform is yellow or grey. And I know grey is the lowest one in the original game, so that could be what this guy is. But as we can see, his projectile isn't just a straightforward one. It's two making it almost like a DNA pattern. This was in the original game, so I believe this is the lower tier soldier. Next, we see Cutter using the Hawk MK8, which looks a bit less interesting than its original model, and the projectiles do come out a bit whiffy on the sides there. But when they do hit their targets, they do make a lovely, beautiful effect. And as we can see, the landscape is just lit up by these explosions, and it looks beautiful. Again, we can see the Kaful there in the background, very nice. Another demonstration of destructive behavior. We see it blowing up a crate. It's hard to see, but the projectile goes into the soldier, hits him and the container behind him, which we can see has been blown up, as we can see pieces just coming off it here to the left. Fantastic, look at that. Back onto the lava bridge, we can see Cutter's just been hit, but seconds before he's just released a grenade from the Lundo 500, I believe, and we can just about see the path of it. If we look a bit closer, we can see two soldiers running at Cutter, one just here and one behind him. I think the grenade lands just behind the soldier in front. But as we take it frame by frame, we can see the glorious effect of one of these grenades going off. The depth of field is changed, so only Cutter's in focus. A bit of rockery is launched up from the ground, and the explosion just looks fantastic. However, one thing to take into note is that both of the soldiers don't seem to be hit by this at all. We can see the one in front is still walking, and the one behind is basically walking through the explosion. So I think this build of the game we're seeing demoed, I don't think the hitboxes have been fine-tuned as of yet. That's it for the trailer. We've also been given a 17-second promo shot of Cutter standing on the snowy broken bridge back in Razana. There's not much to take from this shot, but I don't believe this wooden crate was down here before. There is one behind, but that's always been part of the sneak test. So either this one does exist in the original game, or it has been added for some unknown reason. Another thing to look into are the trees in the background. Before we just had green cones with some snow added onto it, but now we've got beautiful pine trees. Another thing to look into is the smoke coming out of the chimneys. This was something I talked about in my last video, but it's great to see them working here and working so well. Other than that, the snow looks great, the texture's looking perfect, even on the rooftops, and the sun is out, which makes me wonder if we are going to have a day and night cycle. As before, some of the other footage of Razar looked rather dark, but that's where we're going to leave it. So thanks for watching, guys. This has been an extra Outcast Second Contact video. The third part of the main series will be out sometime in the future, but I thought I'd make this quick trailer breakdown just so you guys had something to watch in between. So what's your thoughts on the trailer? Do you think the world looks beautiful? Do you think the animations don't look good enough for a game from 2017? What are your thoughts? Make sure you type that out in the comment section. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, and stay tuned for more Outcast Second Contact news. And I'll see you next time under the moons. See you later.